President Donald Trump's statement suggesting that the deployment of federal forces in U.S. cities could exceed the number of National Guard troops is a potent blend of political rhetoric and a serious indication of a potential shift in domestic security strategy. This warning, made against the backdrop of civil unrest and debates over federal intervention, raises critical questions about executive power, states' rights, and the future of domestic policing in America. Summary and analysis. Trump's core message is an explicit threat or promise, depending on one's perspective, to use a massive federally controlled security presence to quell violence and disorder in urban centers. Historically, the National Guard operates under the command of state governors, who mobilize them for emergencies. A deployment of more federal troops than the Guard implies a large-scale intervention directed from Washington, D.C., bypassing or overwhelming local and state authorities. Analysis shows this statement is characteristic of a law and order platform, appealing to voters concerned about crime and disorder. It strategically uses fear of chaos to justify a forceful, centralized response. The deployment of federal agents during his presidency in places like Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois, demonstrated this approach, leading to significant confrontations and legal battles over the scope of federal authority to act as domestic police without state consent. The term troops is deliberately ambiguous, potentially referring to federal law enforcement, like Homeland Security agents or actual active duty military personnel. The Posse Comitatus Act generally restricts the use of the military for domestic law enforcement, making the deployment of actual soldiers a far more significant and legally challenging step than using federal police agencies. Reasons for the warning. Several factors likely contribute to Trump issuing such a strong warning. Political strategy. The law and order message is a proven tactic to mobilize a political base and draw a stark contrast with political opponents whom he often characterizes as soft on crime or failing to control their cities. The rhetoric positions the federal government as the necessary savior from local governance failure. Response to perceived disorder. The warning directly addresses concerns, real or exaggerated, about rising crime rates and ongoing protests that have occasionally involved violence or property damage in major urban areas. It signals an impatience with the pace and effectiveness of local police responses. Expansion of executive power. Trump's past actions indicate a belief in a robust and expansive interpretation of executive power, particularly when national security or domestic order is perceived to be threatened. Such a deployment would be an exercise in centralized federal control over state functions. Consequences. A large-scale federal deployment surpassing National Guard numbers would have profound consequences. Constitutional crisis and states' rights conflict. It would immediately ignite a major conflict between the federal government and state or city leadership. Governors and mayors would likely challenge the move legally, citing the 10th Amendment and the principle of federalism, which divides power between federal and state governments. Increased tensions and violence. The presence of a large, uninvited, and heavily armed federal presence could be seen by protesters and residents as an occupation, likely escalating confrontations and leading to further civil unrest rather than quelling it. Militarization of domestic policing. This move would further accelerate the militarization of federal law enforcement agencies, blurring the lines between military action and civilian police work, and eroding public trust. Legal challenges. The use of active duty military would trigger intense scrutiny under the Posse Comitatus Act, potentially requiring the invocation of the Insurrection Act, a rarely used historic law that grants the president authority to deploy U.S. military or National Guard troops for domestic enforcement under specific circumstances. Prediction and potential solutions. Prediction. Should civil unrest significantly increase, or should the political climate demand a forceful response, a move toward increased federal deployment is highly likely. However, a deployment exceeding the National Guard would almost certainly be met with immediate and powerful legal injunctions from state attorneys general, making sustained, large-scale deployment extremely difficult without a declaration under the Insurrection Act. Potential solutions for addressing urban disorder. Prioritize de-escalation and community policing. invest in local police training that emphasizes de-escalation tactics and strengthens community police relations, addressing the root causes of mistrust. Federal assistance, not control. Instead of unilateral deployments, the federal government should offer targeted assistance requested by local officials, such as investigative resources, intelligence, or funding for non-police violence reduction programs, while respecting state and local autonomy. Comprehensive reform. Address systemic issues contributing to unrest, including economic inequality, lack of educational opportunities, and criminal justice reform. Order cannot be achieved solely through force. It requires addressing social and economic justice. Clear legal framework. Congress should consider clarifying the circumstances under which federal agencies can exercise police power domestically, especially within state jurisdictions, to prevent the arbitrary expansion of executive authority.